and part of the Orlando, Florida local Chesterton Society. She's a graduate of Rhode Island School of Design and has worked on video games, toys, and books. She currently works as a character artist for Disney Creative Group. And her work includes the story of a saint, Saint John Paul II, a boy who became Pope. Disney Pixar's Little Golden Book of Coco, which if you haven't seen that movie, it's awesome. Go see that one. And the cover portrait for Walt Disney World, 50 Years of the Most Magical Place on Earth. Her style is quite distinctive and beautiful, but the book that we want to talk about today is Princesses of Heaven. And this is what it looks like. It's a beautiful book, and she's going to be talking about it today. So I am going to let her take it away. Please help me welcome Fabiola Garza.
Hello, everyone. Oh, okay, good. Slides are up. We're doing well. Yeah, Joe put me right after Joseph Pierce, which, that was kind of him. But I do want to thank you all so much for coming and spending some time with me. I always look forward to spending time with fellow Chestertonians. Every time I feel like I'm surrounded by kindred spirits, people who look through the world with the same sense of wonder, common sense, and spiritual reality. Just a bunch of people who secretly wish they could live in the Shire. But we can't. We have to go back to work, and that's okay. It is very important for this talk to look inside yourself and meet your younger self. The child brandishing a stick that was a mighty sword, piling cushions against each other to build a colossal castle, and looping daisies together to make a sparkling crown. This is a time to be young at heart. That is what, as a children's book illustrator and author, I must be, and something we sometimes all forget to be. And it's a great shame, because it is only when we have a childlike spirit that we can see the world as the miracle that it is. As Nancy introduced me, my name is Fabiola Garza, and I am just so grateful to have been invited to share my love of storytelling, and specifically, my new book, Princesses of Heaven, The Flowers, a book that was published earlier this year by Word on Fire, that surpassed all expectations, and that has set me off on an adventure I could have never dreamed of. As I crafted this talk, I meditated on the great impact fairy tales have had on my life, and how Chesterton, among many others, helped me to unveil where they ultimately point to. The true myth, the real-life fairy tale of our royal inheritance given to us by Christ the King. And on our journey to our castle in the clouds, we build friendships with saints who embraced their heavenly inheritance and lived their dignity fully. In college, I was introduced to Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces. How many of you have heard or read of that? Okay, good. I was hoping because it comes up a lot in Chesterton's writings. Not the other way around. And he explores the shared pattern in mythological stories that are led by the hero. The hero is the main archetype he writes about, and in his work lays out the claim that the hero's journey is found across every culture and every age. He considers the life of Christ to be one of those myths, as he did not believe in a known God. About the hero's journey, he said, "A hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man." According to Campbell, the hero goes through the following stages. He begins in the ordinary world, then he is called to an unexpected adventure, and he is plunged into a world he is not used to. He might be helped by a mentor or allies. He goes through trials, overcomes adversity, and receives a reward and returns to ordinary life changed. The overarching theme of death and resurrection clouds the entire epic. Prometheus, Buddha, Jesus. According to many non-Christians, the similar story beats in these often religious tales should give us pause and even confirm that the gospel is just another myth among many. Writers, like myself, learned this structure very early on. Many years ago, I was in New York for a storytelling workshop given by a Pixar storyboard artist. You could see the hero's journey very easily in, to give one example, a movie like Toy Story. Woody, the high-strung cowboy toy, lives happily as a young boy's favorite toy until one day a new and better toy comes along, and then chaos ensues until he learns his lesson and returns home a kinder, more enlightened toy. The similarities among myths did not make me, personally, waver in my faith in the least. In fact, learning about the hero archetype throughout all cultures strengthened me spiritually. We have a story written on our hearts, and we've told it and retold it 1,000 times over. And then, once upon a time, the true hero came, the true myth became flesh, and fulfilled that archetype. And all the stories finally made sense. We knew him, but we didn't yet know him. But I was by far not the first person to think of the eternal story written on our hearts. In Acts 17:22 through 23, St. Paul visits Athens, and he noted how devoted the people were to their gods. But he told the people that their idols were not enough. He saw an altar with an inscription to an unknown god, and then proclaimed the gospel. Paul observed the stories the idol worshippers told themselves to give their lives meaning, and reached into that longing to bring them to the feet of Jesus, fleshy and real, no longer stone. The human imagination is always trying to reach towards transcendent truths, and just as the church teaches that we have natural law written on our hearts, so the drama of creation, damnation, and salvation is written on our hearts as well. Chesterton understood the power of imagination oh so well. Far better than I could ever articulate, he penned in the unmatchable turn of phrase that he so often uses. Imaginative does not mean imaginary. It does not follow that it is all what the moderns call subjective when they mean false. Every true artist does feel, consciously or unconsciously, that he is touching transcendental truths, that his images of shadows of things seen through the veil. In other words, the natural mystic does not know that there is something there, something behind the clouds or within the trees, but he believes that the pursuit of beauty is the way to find it, that imagination is a sort of incantation that can call it up. But what do we do with the myths and the fairy tales once we know Christ? When they are no longer a veiled story that needs unveiling? Oh, they are so important, essential. How often we lose the wonder of our very own Christian existence. It becomes mundane to us. Angels become as ordinary as neighborhood stray dogs. And hearing the miracle of water turned into wine loses its glamour after the umpteenth time we've heard it proclaimed from the pulpit. We enter churches and are not taken aback by the crucified Christ. We are no longer horrified. We lose our awe. We need fairy tales. They are the mirror that reflect back wonder, that heightens our ideals, and ultimately, once we realize once again we are living in a real life fairy tale, where a lost princess or prince are found by a king. We see angels, the Eucharist, and water turned into wine for the wondrous works that they are. I poured that knowledge into my own storybook, Princesses of Heaven. I wanted to help children and grown-ups to see saints anew, as if they were just meeting them for the first time, turning a crystal and seeing them reflected by a new facet. As I was growing up, I met the saints through many artistic renditions. Most often, I'd come upon paintings or statues with saints with placid expressions, with almost copycatted facial features from one image to the other. They were beautiful in their own way, but were they approachable? Did they seem like they were once like me? Not really. I had an idea to bring fairy tale wonder to the very real stories of saints by using not the archetype of the hero, but perhaps an adjacent or offshoot of it, the archetype of the princess. Joseph Campbell talked about many archetypes in myths: the hero, the trickster, the mentor. However, there is no idea, no character that captured my heart and the hearts of other little girls than that of the princess. The journey from scullery maid to true love and ultimately happily ever after. The princess speaks deeply to the feminine heart. And it is not surprising that just when we think we've seen the last retelling of Cinderella, there is another book or movie just waiting around the corner. I always wanted to be a fairy tale princess. And unfortunately, as a little girl, I did not know that I already was, and that there was a king who did not need me to prove my worth and who had happily ever after all prepared for me. In short, I had yet to uncover the fairy tale so I could put Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White in their proper place in my life, so that when I enjoyed their stories, the experience would be all wonder, all hope, and good lessons, not anxiety about my identity, worth, and ultimate end. And I know that I was not the only one worrying about my worth. Girls begin to struggle with their self-esteem pretty early in life. They grasp at beauty, relationships, grades, accolades, anything. And Christ is desperately waving a flag, trying to get their attention, shouting, "Stop grasping. I have given you everything already." I felt deep in my bones that I had to make a book that was a culmination of all these revelations, one geared to our littlest girls who are starting to know and understand stories and meet saints for the first time, using simple language but enduring truths, and filled with fairy tale-like images. And now it's done out in the world. And the storybook begins like this. Every girl is a princess. The King of Kings gave you a heavenly crown to decorate with faith, hope, and charity. Like picking flowers in a garden to make a bouquet for someone you love, choose wonderful deeds to adorn your crown. There is no princess more beautiful than one who lives for God. And the book continues to highlight a decisive moment in 6 saints' journeys, their Princess of Heaven journey. We follow Saint Joan of Arc, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux, Saint Gudeli de Caquita, Saint Josephine Bakhita, Saint Lucy Yi Shanmei, and Narcisa de Jesus. When I developed these mini stories, I knew that I needed at least 5 story beats to complete the arc of every epic story. An introduction to our princess saint, their worldview being shaken or a call to task, a trial and a victory. This would be enough to highlight a unique virtue they possessed. Every girl is described as wearing her very own particular heavenly crown of flowers. Sometime after the book was released, I realized that each saint's tale paralleled a famous fairy tale, without even trying. It's so incredible how imagination reflects reality. I could only hope that at the end, our child reader would feel as much wonder as one might from reading about a fairy godmother spinning a ball gown out of thin air. The reenchantment of spiritual reality is so important in the everyday, in our routines and how we view ourselves, in how we see God working in our lives. I thought Joan of Arc is very obviously the warrior princess. The ancient Chinese story of Mulan, popularized worldwide by Disney's interpretation, follows a young girl who takes on the role of soldier for the sake of her father. Very much like St. Joan rallying to the king's aid for the sake of her heavenly father. That one was a no-brainer. That was kind of easy. I could see why somebody might think that was similar. Joan was living a normal life. She could neither read nor write. She was uncommonly pious, but she was ordinary, and was set to live a life similar to the young girls in her village, until her life changed forever when she was charged by 3 saints who appeared to her to end the 100 Years' War and bring lasting peace to France. Digressing a little bit from the main themes of fairy tale and the princess archetype, I wanted to share a few extraordinary facts I learned about Joan as I studied her life. Some of you may know this or may not know this, but the entirety of Joan's trial was transcribed and is available for free online, and I suggest you run, not walk, to go read it. And the court document goes into so much depth about her life. When Joan was captured by the English and put on trial, she went through exhaustive questioning And she talked about her upbringing, her faith formation, her vision, her feelings. It felt like she was in the room with me, this fiery teenager confronting learned, powerful men. Hoping to entrap her, her accusers asked her if she was in a state of grace. She retorted, "If I am not, God put me there. If I am, please God, so keep me." I mean, the entire scene felt oddly like the brave little tailor confronting a giant, David taking on Goliath. And my wheels kept turning, comparing my princess saints to favorite fairy tales. A staple in my life, a story, is East of the Sun, West of the Moon. It's not as well known. I was first introduced to it as The Polar Bear King, a Norwegian film from 1991. A beautiful young girl marries a king who is under a spell. He becomes a polar bear during the day and a man by night. In the movie, her father and sisters are appalled that she would blindly follow a polar bear to an unknown kingdom. And I think that's right. I saw the parallel with Kateri Tekaguitha, or Gadeli de Gaguitha, which is the Mohawk pronunciation of her name. Once Kateri met our Lord, she gave her heart to him, and despite her uncle's wishes, she left her home and went to a faraway mission. I always thought the fairy tale girl who followed the polar bear king was crazy. I really did. I really enjoyed the movie, but I was like, Mom, I don't think that's a smart idea. I mean, he could be lying, it wasn't safe, what if it wasn't true? Her dad was kind of right, you know? And yet when I think of the polar bear king as somebody like Jesus, who even though he looked like an ordinary man but was a prince in disguise, a king in disguise, I understood the fairy tale so much better. The princess had faith in the good news the polar bear brought, so even if everyone thought she was mad, including myself, she trod on. Not surprisingly, I was introduced to a lot of fairy tales through retellings. Of course, I knew Disney's version of The Sleeping Beauty, but I was also enamored with Robin McKinley's novel, Spindle's End. In both versions, a princess is hidden in secret from birth and her identity kept from her until her 16th birthday. Today, the world is full of lost princesses and princes. They go about their day not knowing who they truly are, what they are meant for, and where their king is. And I pray every day that they will find out. It will save them, and the truth saved one slave girl named Vaquita in the late 19th century. In my book, Vaquita comes upon an image of Christ on the cross, a king treated like a slave, put to death. When she learns of her belovedness, she knows she has found her home. When Christ was still unknown to her, she would look up at the sun, the moon, the stars, and think whoever created them must be very wonderful indeed. One of the most heartbreaking features of her life, and there are many, is that Vaquita is not her real name. She was stolen from her family when she was just a child, and the trauma was so great that she completely forgot her name. So hard still to read that. She didn't even have an earthly kingdom to tether herself to. Her name had been taken, her identity stripped. So her captors named her, ever so cruelly, Vaquita, which means lucky. And one day, she would consider herself lucky because her path, however painful it might be, brought her to Christ, and she said that she would kiss her captor's feet in Thanksgiving, which I cannot imagine. But moving along, how many of you watched Neverending Story as a kid, or as an adult, or now? Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, it's still a little traumatizing. That was movies in the 80s. Still, remember Atreyu? I remember Atreyu. Artex? I thought it was, wait, Atreyu's the boy. Sorry. Is the one that sinks and dies. So sad. So anyway, the kingdom of Fantasia is being destroyed by the Nothing, and the empress of the kingdom is pleading with Bastian, the reader of the story, to shout her name. Him knowing and speaking her name will save her and the kingdom. And he does. Her name was Moonchild, which I only found out yesterday when I Googled it, because it was so hard to understand him in the actual movie. But I don't know if I was disappointed or not. I thought it would be something a little bit more flowery, but there you go. Bakita found out who she was and took her rightful place as God's beloved daughter. And we see the value of being named by God when he does so several times in the Bible, from Abram to Abraham, from Simon to Peter. When I designed Bakita in the storybook, I wanted to reflect her warmth and her hope. So I had her wear warm colors and a head covering that looked like the sun with rays. There are many little hidden details and symbols in each illustration. Another little known saint, I wanted to add saints that were not as well as saints that were known, is Narcisa from Ecuador. She was an incredibly gifted young lady, and one of the ways she poured out her love for God was using music, strumming on her guitar and singing. Her voice brought life. In the fairy tale realm, there is another story that could possibly parallel this one. There is an old woman, a fairy in disguise, and she asks a young girl for help, and the young girl does not help her. So she curses her, and she speaks, and when she speaks, snakes and toads come out of her mouth. But the fairy blesses another young girl who does come to her aid. Jewels pour out of her mouth when she speaks, which sounds really uncomfortable. But the symbol remains, which is sort of the point of the story. A person can be life-taking or life-giving, and sweet Narcissa was a gift to all. She embraced the poor and used all her talents for good. Saint Lucy Yi Shanmei is a little-known Chinese martyr. She constantly put her life on the line to evangelize. A saint with special knowledge that could save others. It must have been so tempting to give up and not risk her life. Who knows the original story of The Little Mermaid? Not the Disney one, the Hans Christian Andersen one, a little bit? Okay. So, in the Hans Christian Andersen version of The Little Mermaid, it's actually full of Christian themes on purpose. The Little Mermaid becomes human only to find out that the prince, whom she loves, has married another woman. And this is a matter of life and death because since she has failed to secure his love, her fate is to become sea foam. Very different. The only way to save her life is to kill him. Which, it's a little different. She refuses to, thank goodness, and indeed becomes sea foam. But because of her sacrifice, she obtains a human soul and goes to heaven. For what does it matter if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? I happen to like that version a lot better than the Disney one. Just don't tell my employer. Probably the clearest parallel to a beloved fairy tale I placed in the book, quite on purpose, was in Saint Therese of Lisieux's story. It's the final image which drives home life with Christ as a fairy tale. I kind of used to resent Therese. My father gave me her biography, Story of a Soul, in college. He told me she reminded him of me. As I read, I thought, this girl is so dramatic and so flowery and emotional. Great dad. He thinks I'm an introvert living in La La Land. So good. And it did take me years to realize how strong she was, that her imaginative, over-the-top notions revealed a soul engulfed in wonder. It was not over the top. It was just right. Saint Therese of Lisieux, with her little way, is invoked throughout the world. She promised to spend her heaven praying for us and sending roses upon the earth. She was a true romantic. Spirited, and yeah, a little dramatic. Therese knew the princess archetype very well, and she reveled in it. When she was finally going to take her final vows, she wrote an invitation that went as follows. Prepare yourself. It's a lot. Take water. The Almighty God, creator of heaven and earth, sovereign dominator of the world, and the most glorious Virgin Mary, queen and princess of the celestial court, lower themselves to announce to you the marriage of their son Jesus, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, with Mademoiselle Thérèse Martin, now lady and princess of the kingdoms brought in dowry by her husband, namely the childhood of Jesus and his passion, his titles of nobility being of the child Jesus and of the Holy Face. And it does not stop there. Monsieur Louis Martin, owner and master of the lordships of suffering and humiliation, and Madame Martin, princess, lady-in-waiting of the celestial court, would like to inform you of the marriage of their daughter, Therese, to Jesus, the Word of God. Second person of the Holy Trinity, who by the operation of the Holy Spirit became man, who was born of the Virgin Mary. One more paragraph, one more. Not having been able to invite you to attend the nuptial blessing given to them on Mount Carmel, only the celestial court being admitted there, you are nevertheless requested to go to the wedding return, which will take place tomorrow, the day of eternity, to which Jesus, Son of God, will come on the clouds of heaven to judge the living and the dead. The hour being still uncertain, you are invited to stand ready and watch. So that was our sweet Therese. She was full of feeling and full of gusto, and it's just a pleasure to be able to have these letters and be able to read them. Before she entered the convent, there is one particular story that also made me laugh when I read it. So Therese had been pleading with her family to let her join the convent that her older sisters had entered into. The answer was a firm no. She was too young. But she was determined, so when she was on pilgrimage to Rome, she had an audience with the Pope. She begged for permission to take the veil, begged the Pope. He responded very kindly to go home and to listen to her father. She was so bereft that she could not move, and she had to be carried by a guard out of the room. I could feel the drama going on inside teenage Therese. It felt so normal, so like any other young person who has a dream that doesn't come true. And so I did parallel the final illustration very much on purpose with Cinderella. At the end of the story, Therese is finally accepted into the religious order. She peeks outside a beautiful carriage, marveling at her long-awaited happily ever after. Instead of an opulent castle, there is a humble building where she will pray and live out the rest of her life in loving devotion to her king. George MacDonald is obviously mentioned quite often here for good reason. And he's a fairy tale writer who really understood the importance of capital P princess. Here is an excerpt from his very popular The Princess and the Goblin. He wrote, "There was once a little princess who..." "But Mr. Author, why do you always write about princesses?" "Because every little girl is a princess. You will make them vain if you tell them that." "Not if you understand what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" "What do you mean by a princess?" "The daughter of a king." "Then every little girl is a princess, and there would be no need to say anything about it, except that she is always in danger of forgetting her rank and behaving as if she had grown out of the mud. I have seen little princesses behave like the children of thieves and lying beggars, and that is why they need to be told they are princesses. This is Saint Therese. One of the really cool things when you read about saints is that you find out they're connected in many unexpected ways. So she actually put on a play where she played Joan of Arc, which I think is super cool, and I wanted to show you guys that because I really think that spiritual friendship is a many-layered thing, and you connect across every age, across every time, and finally in heaven, you get to meet in the most perfect way. So back to the book. Princesses of Heaven, The Flowers came out in March. I thought it'd do well, I worked really hard. But nothing could have prepared me for its reception. And it wasn't the sheer number of books that were being sold that brought me to tears. That was nice, of course. Everybody loves royalties. It was the parents and the children writing in. I knew God was doing something, and I asked him to work with whatever was happening for as long as he saw fit. The book has taken on a life of its own, and I get to watch it happen. A mom wrote in very recently. She said that her and her mom friend took their girls to a playground, and they watched them begin to play convent. Each chose a heavenly flower crown to wear. She said she looked over at the mom and exclaimed, "You must own Princesses of Heaven." And she said, yeah, I own that book. And that's what they were playing. And I cried a lot after I read that. What children find fascinating, that is what they play at. What makes their imagination and joy come alive, that is what they decide to act out. I expected the book to do well, not to lay before me a new vocation. And that is what I hope If God wills, Princesses of Heaven and following projects will continue to instill wonder and faith, to never let it become mundane, to let children know that they are not alone, that they have friends in heaven, and that the saints in heaven are now friends with each other, no longer separated by space, time, war, anything. So before Q&A, I just want to let you know that I brought as many books as I could fit in my checked baggage. So that was about 25 copies, I think. But Word on Fire, of course, does have the book online, so you can also purchase it there. And on Instagram, you can follow me on Fabiola Garza Creates, and my email's the same thing, just gmail.com. And another thing, oh, Joseph Pierce, you talked about how you don't like France, and I'm leading a pilgrimage to France next year. So my pitch for France is the saints, Saint John, Saint Therese, Francis de Sales, Saint James de Chantal. Well, it has its good things. So you are more than welcome to come with me, if you want to. And there are flyers on my table. And people are nice in France outside of Paris. So yes, that is it. That's the talk.
When's the movie coming out?
People ask that all the time. When I'm a millionaire, that would be good. Yeah. Yeah, it costs a lot of money, but I'd honestly be very open to doing something like that. But that means I would have to stop doing books because that's a full-time endeavor.
Storytelling's obviously part of being human. Do you have any suggestions of how to break through the growing aversion of older children to stories and reading, for the sad ones, unfortunately, that their parents didn't instill?
That's hard. Sometimes I just think it's good books that you loved when you were a kid. I was surprised with this one. There were moms writing in that their little boys were reading them and that their teenagers were. So it just has to be really good quality. And sometimes it's also taking time, take away their phones, take away their iPads, go into the forest, go to the cabins, and just be like, sorry, this is time. And they will be so bored. And that is good for them. And the only thing around will be books, and they will read. So that is my suggestion.
Thank you so much for your talk. You perfectly carry out Tolkien's philosophy of myth. As an aspiring writer to follow you and Tolkien, what is your suggestion for taking the first step in a world that doesn't spread that idea?
Honestly, I think if you have a story to tell, I think that's the biggest thing. Sometimes I think we have no story to tell and we're trying to write, and sometimes what we have to do is read other stories that we love. And slowly inside, something will start to form, and there'll be a story that you desperately want to tell. And that's going to be a good story, because when it's a story that only you can tell, because it comes from all of your experiences, all your feelings, something is uniquely you, I think that really touches people. So I would say go from there and don't care what other people think. I do want to express, for instance, we know that Disney is a secular company, but I did want to let them know that I was making this book because I didn't want there to be an issue. And when I finished, they were so excited, so excited. Most of these people are not religious, living a very different life, but they bought it. They loved it. They said it's so important for little girls to know their princesses. And they had me do a presentation on it. And I got to talk about Joan and Saint Therese and all this stuff. And there's just something that when somebody sees beauty or something good, they'll want to share it. And the things that make them a little uncomfortable, they'll put it aside a little bit. So that's what I suggest.
Anyone else?
Oh, there's.
Back there.
I knew it. It was coming.
So, if I could just repeat the question for those at home.
Boys.
Yeah. Does Fabiola have any plans for a book for boys? Yes.
It is not the following one, but afterwards, I'm hoping to do either Knights or Warriors of Heaven. Yeah, so that'll be fun, but it's gonna be. I'm gonna approach it a little bit differently because obviously I'm a girl. I'm very certain of that, and yeah. So I want to talk to a lot of men about the things that they needed to hear when they were little, which is very important, and it's different things than what I needed. So that's going to be very exciting and very enlightening to me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I happen to have a copy of the book in my hand, and I'm actually dazzled by the production quality. I mean,
Yes,
you
they
see
did a
gold leaf
wonderful
edges.
job.
Every page is colored. It's hard copy. It's so different than most books you would see at a bookstore where they're trying to really lower the price
Yes.
and do everything. How did you
Make
persuade
them?
your publisher to go that route?
Luckily, I've been friends with a few people in who work in Word on Fire for a very long time. I had seen a book that was very high quality, and I sent it to them. I was like, I want it like this, please. And they were very for it. I mean, if you see the quality of their printing and their Word on Fire Bible, I thought it was beautiful. And I know beauty is important to them. So I might have micromanaged just a little bit. But I think we were all really excited to know that we were able to pull it off because I wanted it to feel like a little treasure in your hands. That was my goal.
Fabiola, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much.
And Fabiola will be out in the lobby signing copies of her books. I believe Joseph Pierce is still there and Father Rainier. Thank you.